Hey everyone, so what we're going to talk about here real quick is going to be about wrist injury inducing mechanics that we see in the golf swing. And so we want to make sure we take care of these guys, the wrist, because without them feeling well, it's not going to be fun or easy to play golf in any part of the game, really. And so we want to make sure that we take care of it. And so these are going to be the top things to be aware of to make sure you're preventing these things and not having these things happen, because these will lead to a greater likelihood of having wrist injuries and wrist pain. So number one is poor use of the lower body. Now, philosophically, instructors may say, to keep that quiet. We want to make sure that we're using it appropriately, because if we don't, we're going to put excessive stress elsewhere. And sometimes we try to use the wrist a little bit more to give us the distance or the speed that we're looking for, or the contact that we're looking for. Another thing is going to be hitting off of harder surfaces like mats. Typically when you make the transition from hitting off of grass, the driving range, maybe during the peak months for golf, the summer months, then you get into the winter months and things are dormant, and then you might have mats at your driving range or an indoor hitting bays, or your own hitting mat in your backyard or your garage. Hitting into mats, you're not going to have the same feedback as you would with the ground, and clearly you probably have felt that. It changes the attack angle that you're going to have as well with your irons, and so it could teach bad habits with that. I'm not going to get into that, but it's going to be something where you need to be aware of with how much you do swing into your mats, to be aware of the volume or the amount of swinging that you're doing, because you're going to get more feedback into the wrist as a result, and also up the chain a little bit too. So be aware of that. Fat divots, those aren't fun, but they also don't feel good either, right? When you really hit one really fat and you get that recoil, you might even drop your club when you hit a really fat divot. But even just doing that over time, even if you take a really good divot and you hit the ball pretty well, if you take too fat of a divot with it, that might be, a little bit of a cause for, especially if you're having wrist pain, to evaluate that, to analyze that, to make sure maybe there's to see if there's maybe a better way to swing so that you don't take as much turf with that, because it's going to still transmit up the chain a little bit. Sudden increase in training volume, or the volume of practice with your swings. Again, we talked about the volume with the mats when you transition to mats or harder surfaces when you swing. We want to be careful with how many times, if you've taken a couple months off from golf, or if you haven't played in a while and you do a couple hundred swings, it's a lot of volume for the whole body, let alone the wrist. So being careful of how much practice that you go through, how much volume you go through without, if you have these peaks of highs and lows with how much you're practicing or playing, being aware that you don't suddenly increase the amount of practice that you do, because that could lead to some injuries, not just wrist, but elsewhere. Other things are alteration of the grip. If you go from strong to a weak grip, or vice versa, it's a change. And so anything that you change, you want to be aware of that there needs to be adaptations to take place, because we're used to this way. The wrist and the muscles are used to a certain way. Well, when we change that, it's going to cause a different loading pattern in those tissues. So be aware of that. It might take a little bit of time. Ramp it up a little bit over time. Don't go, I'm going to use this grip that we just fixed and swing a lot of balls with that. Maybe not the wisest thing, but think of it as a progression of adaptation. You're getting used to it. And you will be getting used to it too, because it's a new feel. But that's alteration of the grip. Another one is casting the club over the top, or chicken winging. So those three things go hand in hand usually. But if we're coming over the top, there's a lot of wrist action going here. If we're coming casting the club, or if we're chicken winging the club in our arms, those are going to all cause excessive stress to the wrists. So be mindful of that. Talk to your instructor about that. Talk to me about that. physical therapy or understanding how your body is moving is going to be important to addressing a lot of that typically, because those could be the result of physical mobility problems, specifically the shoulder for a lot of people. But death gripping the club, death gripping, palm gripping, having wrong grip sizes for your club are going to be all things that are going to lead to possibly some wrist injuries. Doesn't mean it's going to cause wrist injuries, just be mindful of those things. Death grip is something that will lead to a wrist injury over time, because if you're really gripping really, really hard, that's going to load everything very differently. You're not going to be hinging the proper way and then releasing the proper way, and so you're going to get probably some fat divots. You're going to have to, decelerate in certain ways because you're not allowing the wrist to freely load and unload. So be mindful of the death grip. But wrong size club or swing weight, wrong club, wrong size, wrong flex. So we're talking about club fitting things here. You want to make sure that your club is fitted to you. And so, go find a club fitter to make sure that you address those specifications here in town. Loggerhead is a great company to go to get that evaluated, to get that looked at. But that's going to be down the rabbit hole of a lot of different things that you could look at to make you a more efficient golfer. But making sure you have those things right, because if you don't, it could cause a stress in the wrist that you don't really want to have. So those are all things to be aware of when it comes to wrist pain with golf, and the swing-inducing mechanics that you could have that could lead to wrist injuries. If you hadn't have the chance to have an assessment for your golf mobility centers, go ahead and check out our home assessment if you haven't taken it. And if you need any physical therapy or fitness related to getting you better at golf, give us a call and let's get you on the right path to get you to where you want to be.